Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests today are from an upcoming Red Cedar Chamber concert, but we have a few extra people than we usually do. In fact, one of the larger studio groups that we have here, those who are watching the video can see I've had to go to the extra wide shot to accommodate everyone, but because it's Red Cedar Chamber, that means we have Mira Kim and Carrie Boston. Welcome.
Thank you.
And the special guests for what you're calling the crossover quartet are two well-known faces and voices and instruments to KCCK fans. It's Blake Shaw and Dan Padley. Nice to have you both here.
Hello, thanks for having us.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. So, crossover quartet. Obviously, we're going to be crossing over genres, I suspect, just a little bit. Mira, why don't you start and tell me how this project came about?
We, at Red Cedar, we always like to bring something different to our audiences, and we like to challenge ourselves. And jazz is a genre that we really love, and although we wouldn't call ourselves jazz musicians, we're really having fun playing all of this music. Carrie first had this idea several years ago.
Yeah, and you know, it was suggested we check out Blake Shaw, and of course I had known of him. And so we, for a while, because he's just everywhere. And
But you had to work 2 years out to get on his schedule.
yeah, exactly. And so we met with him. He's like, yeah, we got to have Dan on this too. So that's where it started. And then we decided to commission both of them to write new music for us. And then we also have 4 jazz standards.
Before we get to program, I just want to dive into that just a little bit. So we have 4 string players here, but different genres, even though you've all dipped your toe into each other's. But this had to be, for the two of you, a really different experience, having a bassist, but a jazz bassist, and electric guitar player. Is this the first time that we've had an electronic instrument at Red Cedar?
Actually, no.
Okay.
Jan and John brought in Dave Bosenhard, who was both a classical and an electric or jazz guitarist, and he wrote a piece for them. And so the program
Which
had
was electric guitar, acoustic guitar,
flute and cello.
Yeah.
Sure. It's called Whirlpool Side. And it was a great experience. And even though it's terrifying for an acoustic instrument to play with an amplified instrument, I had some idea that we could make it work. And of course, Dan is very tasteful.
Dan is such a tasteful player. It's just not even.
There's a lot of ways I'd refer to Dan Padley's music, but I don't know that terrifying. Unless
terrifying.
Unless you are trying to copy what he's doing, then that's terrifying. So we're going to talk about the original compositions, but before we do that, you decided to also play some jazz standards. So what are those, and how did you pick them?
So we have Embraceable You on the program by the Gershwins, and that's a piece that, I guess it's a song. I listened to the recording on A Long Drink of the Blues. It's a Jackie McLean album. I listened to that version like hundreds of times in my life. And so I always loved that solo, and Blake was kind enough. I had tried to transcribe it by ear over the years with very little success, but Blake was just like, okay, and he was able to get most of it down for me. Not most of it, some of it. And so I'm actually playing that solo on it. And I'm just so thrilled because I've always wanted to do that.
It was really interesting to do that because just Jackie McLean is a saxophone player, for the people that don't know that. So to transfer that to violin was really interesting. But I think it really works. I think it's really beautiful. That's one of the pieces that I'm most excited about, for sure.
While we're on that, talk just a little bit about transcribing and arranging these. Again, usually you're working in ensembles that have horn players, and so you're figuring out parts for the horn players, but this time it's all strings. So how did that change your workflow?
Articulation. Oh my gosh, I think that's the big thing. Articulation and a little bit of groove. Because although I'm a string player and I've been through orchestra and I got a string-based classical degree or whatever, I mostly...
He's pedigreed.
I got the degrees. But I mostly work with horn players, so telling them how to punch this or play this note. is different than a string player. So it was just took a little extra thinking or whatever, and maybe just a couple more marks on the paper. But really, it really lays nicely. I did change a couple keys every once in a while. Horns love those flat keys.
Yeah, the flats.
We
Made
do
it a little
not.
easier on myself.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about the new arrangements of jazz standards before we move on to the new compositions?
We have Driftin' by Herbie Hancock. And then really special idea is I felt like we ought to have something by John Rapson, who was just near and dear to so many people's hearts. And actually, I'm the only one in the room who didn't study with John Rapson. But my first year as a graduate student was his first year on the faculty, and he was really nice.
And I took Intro to Jazz Studies with John Rapson, so maybe I have to owe everything to him.
And of course, Blake and Dan, you are a part of many of John's projects. Esteban and the Children of the Sun, Hot Tamale Louie, along with all of his other compositions. How did you settle on which one to play?
We picked a tune of his from Hot Tamale Louie. It's I believe it's the last tune of the show.
Yep, it is.
The Sun Will Never Set on the Prairie.
Yeah.
And I believe he based it on a Chinese folk tune, but it's just a really beautiful tune with kind of this like circular chord progression. I don't know. It just pulls you in.
We needed something trance-y. It was one of the last tunes that we decided to arrange for this group, and all the other tunes groovy. Dan's got some really beautiful harmonies, so we needed something that you could just like sit and close your eyes and get lost in it. And that's exactly what that tune was, I think. Even in any situation that we played, it always turns out like that.
Tell me a little bit about the original stuff that you composed for this, Dan. You go ahead and start.
So I have a 4-piece suite called the Turkey River Suite. And when I was first starting to write music for this, all the stuff I was coming up with, similar to the John piece we just talked about, it has this kind of like circular, not minimalist, but this like meditative quality. And it was all reminding me of water churning. And there's actually a piece called Churn in there. And it was reminding me of my dad's step family has this cabin we've been going to for ages up in northern Iowa, and it's on the Turkey River. And so it seemed like an apt metaphor for this music I was making. Yeah, and so it's based on, it evokes images of the Turkey River and like the surrounding nature. And then the last piece is a bit of an outlier where it's the melding of, Mira had a good idea about that's like the melding of nature, and then it's called Cars and Coyotes, and so it's this kind of meeting of the nature with the humans and the animals and all that.
And I love the way this piece has a really chamber music feel to it. This is not jazzy per se.
Yeah,
It's
I didn't really come at it even thinking of I came at it thinking I wanted to make chamber music more or less.
yeah, and so it does have grooves
Yeah,
and,
and there's
all,
solos
and
and
solos.
stuff. Yeah. So
yeah.
those elements, it's jazz adjacent, I've been calling it.
But we're not swinging it.
Yeah.
It's more about like the harmonies, and it's lovely. Thank you. Yeah.
Blake, tell me about your piece.
Mine is a little different.
Blake has all the groove for us.
Yeah. And I've been playing with Dan for so long that his voice in music is in my head a lot. But so I specifically tried to do something different. I knew what Dan was going to bring. Like I said, I just know his music. When I was composing my music, I was thinking of things that are going on in the world and stuff. So a lot of my titles come from doing things together, kindness, empathy, and just those words I tried to put into the music. So my tunes, I took it gets a little bit more jazzy. For definitely, we swing a little bit more in mine. A few of the tunes actually follow pretty closely the blues form, so you can't get more jazzy than that. I usually don't say that word too many times, but it looks good today. But yeah, so I was following that, melding some modern harmonies and older style jazz things, and just trying to make as many groovy things as possible. Playing without a drummer is fantastic. I do like a fantastic challenge. And that's where I come from when I'm thinking about arranging or composing. I'm always thinking about the groove, almost always first. I fit that. Each instrument kind of gets their chance to take control of the groove, if that makes sense. Mira plays percussion on her violin every once in a while. I give some bass lines to Carrie every once in a while. Dan just does chords and solos every once in a while, so he's pretty normal. But I just that togetherness and throwing different roles at different instruments was my thought process through composing.
And
this.
then speaking of grooves, like your last movement.
Move is one.
And this was really exciting for me. I had this bass line, this groovy bass line for years.
10 years. Yeah.
Really
Literally.
groovy. You got to hear it to believe it.
I'm really excited about it. Dan and I made it up when we were in our undergraduate. So seriously, 10 years ago, I've had this bass line sitting around waiting to use it for something, and I wanted it to be something special, and finally got the chance. So you'll get to hear it.
We're so honored. Yeah.
A song 15 years in the making. Yeah. So when these charts started showing up and they started showing you the ideas, you commission so much new work. You work with so many different styles of composers, all different genres. But this had to be just a little bit different than some of the stuff you've done in the recent past.
For me, because I just don't have a great understanding of jazz forms, jazz harmonies, I was looking at it with my normal filters in terms of, I see what's on the page and I can conceptualize it really well. This was a lot different, and it was more challenging for me to understand what was going on. But as we dug into it, and especially after we started rehearsing, I see great aspects of these jazz forms, but also a understanding of a traditional chamber music form, like a string quartet. And so that was great. And also getting to know each of the composers' personal styles beforehand. I was expecting certain things from each of them, and we got it. This is that, like, Dan's it's really interesting harmonic language and texture. And then I was expecting Blake to crank it up a little bit.
I'm curious, when we commissioned you guys, did it seem like a daunting task? Because
I was terrified.
see, there's the terrified,
I
yeah.
remember, so I wrote it on the Sibelius program.
So you were just casually, I can do that.
Yeah, I was excited to.
Yeah,
and then and then as I'm doing it and hearing back the terrible MIDI sounds back, I was like, oh, this sounds awful, and they're gonna hate it. And then the first time we played it, and you guys play so beautifully, obviously, and it was like, okay, this is gonna be okay. Like, this is gonna work out. So yeah, I was definitely excited to do it, but then also, like, I'm sitting there at the computer like, I'm in way over my head.
It sounds as this process unfolded that you all went into it expecting, this is going to be really different. But then in the process, you really discovered the commonalities between jazz and what we think of as traditional chamber
Absolutely.
music.
And it's difficult. The things that we're learning from each other, I think, a lot of it's just different language. Same principles, different language.
Same 12 notes.
Yep. And we just love the experience of learning something new. And these guys are amazing artists.
And they've been very gracious, I must
for
say.
us.
They've had some pointers, and I'm usually like, I'll work on that.
We'll have several opportunities to hear this unique concert because, as usual, Red Cedar, you'll tour all around the area, some kind of private shows, some kind of quasi-public, some in rural areas, but then culminating in a couple of public performances. So, Carrie, it's your job to run down the schedule.
So we do have several senior sites that we're visiting. But April 10th, Thursday, April 10th.
That's our first show.
Our first show, noon, at the Cedar Rapids Public Library. And we get a really good audience there. I'm expecting that to be great. Rural Outreach that evening, Thursday, April 10th, at the Williamsburg Public Library. The next day, Friday, in Ainsworth.
And
they're
the
going to love us.
Ainsworth experience is always unique. There's a pre-concert meal. It's just a full evening of fellowship and music.
And historian Michael Zoz is the host down there. So that's a $25 ticket, but it includes a great meal. And that's 7 o'clock. And then we play at Ballantine Auditorium, 7:30 on Tuesday, April 15th. Lau Park in Marion, Wednesday, April 16th, 7 p.m. And the Senior Center in Iowa City, 2 p.m. Friday, April 18th. That's always a great audience. And then the final show, which we'll live stream, is at CSPS, April 18th, Friday evening. Tickets are $30 in advance and $35 at the door.
All right, it's the Crossover Quartet in action with some jazz standards and also some brand new compositions and, of course, music from the great John Rapson. So you're really encompassing so many different things that y'all love and that y'all are good at.
Yeah.
Again, if you'd like more information, of course, we hit you with a lot of dates here. So you'll want to visit the Red Cedar website for that, which is, Mira?
www.redcedar.org.
Sounds like a fun project. I'm looking forward to hearing it. Thank you all for being here.
Thank
you.
You can hear The Culture Crawl live on the radio most weekdays at 10:30, on demand at kcck.org/culture, or subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Watch our videos on the KCCK Facebook and YouTube channels. Our producer is Lydia Kilgore. The Culture Crawl theme is composed by Vivian Shanley. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.